Today we're cooking lasagna. Lasagna is a firm family favorite of mine, and I've grown up eating this a ton. Therefore, I'm going to show you my favorite recipe for this. I'm going to take you through step by step to show you exactly the best way I like to make lasagna. There's a few key tips we're going to be using, but stay tuned and I'll show you them all throughout this video. We're going to be making everything from scratch. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to be making the bolognese, the bechamel sauce. We're not using ricotta, we're doing the real deal here, and then we're going to be making fresh pasta. Stay tuned and stick around to see what it's like. The first thing we're going to be preparing for this lasagna is the ragu that's going inside it. We're going to be doing a sofrito to start. This is your essential base of flavor to any Italian ragu. This is celery, onion and carrot. You can swap this out with stuff like fennel and different vegetables if you want slightly different tastes, but I'm going to be using the classic for this one. So I've got some celery here. I'm just going to cut off the ends. Make sure you've rinsed it because often it can be quite muddy. And cut off these ends. And then for this, I'm going to dice it as finely as I can. You can chuck this all in a food processor if you want. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be really, really small. I'm just going to run my knife through it to get it a little bit smaller. Perfect. And then set this aside and I'm going to chop the rest of the vegetables. Vegetable number 2 for the sofrito is carrots. These add a really nice sweetness, and when they start to break down and slow cook, a really nice umami-ness as well. So just peel them. If you didn't know, these peelers are called speed peelers for a reason. You can go both ways. So just cut off the ends, cut off these ends, cut along like that into strips. And then you're going to go along these and cut them into little battens, or julienne is like the correct technical term. And then when they're all in battens, you're just going to cut across. Now carrot is the most important one to cut small. I personally don't like having a really big chunk of carrot in my ragu. And then just pass your knife through one more time, and there you'll have the perfectly finely diced carrot. And then the third ingredient for our sofrito is the onion. Now this is your staple, you can't go without an onion. So just cut off one of the ends, leave the root end intact, cut it in half and just peel. Again, you guys know how to dice an onion, so skip this part if you want to. And then leaving the root end intact, just gonna cut along like that. One cut across for good luck, then cut across. Okay, we've done the mundane prep of chopping the vegetables, so we're now gonna make the ragu. So we're using 2 types of meat for this. This is how you do it best. You can use just beef, you can use just pork, but a 50-50 mix of 12 to 20% beef and 12 to 20% pork goes really well. You can use lean minces here, but I think fat is flavor, so if you're having it as a treat, use a higher fat percentage, you'll get more flavor in the ragu and it will taste that bit better. Grab yourself a heavy base cast iron pan. These are best when you're slow cooking ragus and meats and all that kind of stuff. They retain the heat better and you'll get a better cook overall. You can use stainless steel pans, but would highly recommend this just because of the heat retention. So we're gonna whack this up to high, the top heat you can get, and we're gonna preheat this, get it really hot. So it's a bit of a hot pan now, so I'm just gonna go in with some high heat oil, and then I'm gonna do half and half to start with. So we're gonna do half for the beef mince, that's the sound you wanna hear, and half of the pork mince. And then we're gonna leave this to caramelize and cook it for about 5 minutes until it's really brown and quite crispy. This is the flavor that will take it to that next level, so you have to do this. There's no point stewing your meat here. Don't overcrowd the pan, use a really high heat, and do it in batches, and you'll get really beautifully seared meat. Break it down with your spoon as you're going, otherwise you'll get quite big chunks when you're cooking later. And as you can see here, it's starting to get a little bit of caramelization. I'm now gonna preheat the oven, so as soon as we started cooking the meat, I'm gonna get the oven preheating to 160 degrees Celsius. Once it's preheated, the food should be ready to go in. So after a few minutes, the meat should be nice and seared. We've got some really nice bits of caramelization in here. And we're now gonna set this aside, do the other batch, and then we're gonna get the vegetables in. All the beef and pork has now been seared, so it's time to get the vegetables in to start sauteing down, to caramelize them a little bit before we cook the rest of the dish. So into the same pan, we're gonna add the vegetables we prepared earlier. So the carrots, the celery, and the onion. A little bit more oil, a generous pinch of sea salt. And then we're just gonna cook this for about 5 to 10 minutes until it's completely softened and starting to caramelize. And now it is ready to add in the rest of the ingredients. So we've got some bay leaves, a big sprig of thyme, some garlic cloves. Just grate these in so they're minced. And give this a little mix. Cook those flavors off for a few minutes, and then we're gonna go in with some red wine, or white wine is actually more traditional, but here I'm using some red wine. You don't have to use alcohol if you don't want to. So once the wine has bubbled off, we're going to use a little bit of passata. I'm using Mutti. Obviously, you've got to use the best quality tomatoes you can. Don't cheap out on tomatoes. They're the one thing that makes such a difference to flavour. And we're going to go back in with the seared beef and pork. We're going to add some beef stock. Mix that all in. Give it a final season with some black pepper and another generous pinch of sea salt. And the secret ingredient is a spare Parmesan rind. If you have one of these lying over, or you use a Parmesan up and you don't know what to do with the rind, don't chuck it away. Save it, wrap it up and put it in the fridge. And when you're next doing a ragu or a bolognese, add it in. It adds such a good depth of flavor, a little bit of saltiness. As you can see here, it's started to boil. So we'll cover it. And then we're going to place it in the oven. We're going to cook it for 3 to 4 hours, but we're going to check it every hour or so, topping up with liquid if needed. Halfway through, we're going to add in some milk, so I'll cut back to 2 hours when we're going to do the next step. The ragu has been cooking in the oven for a couple of hours now, so I'm going to get some milk. This is another secret ingredient, which really works well. It helps tenderize the meat and it adds a nice richness to it. We're then going to mix it in and cook it for a little bit more, and then it will be ready. Then we're going to put it back in the oven to finish cooking. Honestly, it smells so good, and I'm super excited to try it in the lasagna. And the bolognese is now made. This is absolutely perfect. It's not too runny. It looks really thick and rich. We just need to pick out the stalks, and then we're good to go for serving this in lasagna. We've done component 1, the ragu. The next component we're going to be doing is the fresh pasta. You can use store-bought lasagna sheets if you want to, but I'm going to show you how to make fresh pasta. This is so tasty, and it makes it really, really nice when you're doing it. It just levels it up that little bit more. So I'm going to show you how I like to do a really easy and simple batch of fresh pasta. We're not doing anything fancy, not just egg yolks, not all of that kind of stuff. We're going to be using a really simple ratio, and anyone can do this at home. First up, we need pasta flour. Now this is Tipo 00 flour. This is the one thing that you probably should get. To simply put it, it's milled even finer than your typical flour, and it just helps with the texture and taste of the pasta dough. First thing, I'm just gonna weigh out 400 grams of this pasta flour. And then we want 1 teaspoon of fine sea salt, and then give that a little mix. And tip it out onto a clean work surface and make a little indent in the middle with the bottom of your bowl. Now onto the eggs. The eggs are quite important here. I'm using some St. Hugh's rich yolk eggs. These are really good quality. And we're just gonna crack 4 into the middle of this well. So the first thing we need to do is whisk all these egg yolks together. And then once you've got them mixed together, we're gonna slowly start to add in the flour. And bit by bit, as you keep adding this in, it should come into a cohesive mass. So if you've got a dough scraper, use one of these to help. But now it's starting to get quite thick. We're just gonna add in most of the flour, and you're just gonna fold it through until you can then use your hands. So the reason I'm doing this is just to help get that egg interspersed into as much flour as possible. If you start kneading it too early, you will struggle to get all the flour absorbed into the dough because it's such a stiff dough. And if you haven't already, please do click the subscribe button and the little bell icon to be notified when I'm next doing a video. It really helps support me in the channel. So yeah, I appreciate every single one of you guys who watch these videos. And now I'm gonna get my hands stuck in, and we're just gonna bring it together like this. This is definitely one of those things that's really fun to cook with other people. You can all get a bit messy together. If you're an adult and you've got kids, get the kids to do this, I'd love it. And I'm gonna scrape away all of this like dry crumbs of pasta. So doing what we did earlier, avoided most of that, but this just gets rid of any excess and basically means our pasta will be nice and smooth and we're not gonna have any clumps in it when we start to knead it. Just start using your hands in a kneading motion like this. You can also use this dough for so many other shapes of pasta. You can make homemade tagliatelle, you can make spaghetti, all different kinds. And it's a really basic pasta recipe that anyone can make at home. After about 10 minutes of kneading, you should end up with a nice smooth dough like this. We're gonna wrap it up in cling film and leave it to rest for about 3 hours in the fridge. You can do it for about 1 to 2 hours, but the longer you leave it, the better texture pasta you'll get later on. Pasta dough has now rested for a few hours, and I'm now gonna roll it out and laminate it. Laminating it is when you fold it over and roll it out on itself, just to strengthen the dough a bit, and then it will be ready to stack in the lasagna. Okay, so I'm just gonna cut this dough in half, and then I'm gonna wrap this other half back up. We're gonna roll it out a little bit. Now, if you've got a wine bottle, you can roll it with a wine bottle. If you've got a rolling pin, you can roll it with a rolling pin. If you have a pasta machine, then that is great as well, and you can use that. I'm gonna use my pasta machine. If you do get a machine, you can get a hand machine for about 20 quid on Amazon, and you can use this forever. KitchenAid out! The beautiful thing about a stand mixer is you can get attached montes like this, the roller. So unscrew that. So just gradually feed it through on the widest setting. Do it 2 times through each setting. Then you can go down and you can get narrower. So each setting, do it narrower. After a few times, then you fold it over, and then I'll show you how to fold it over shortly. And the idea behind this is it just strengthens the gluten in the pasta dough. So if you make homemade pasta, sometimes it can go very wrinkly, it can fall apart, it can go very stodgy. That's because you haven't laminated it properly. And this is the one thing that people often overlook when they're making homemade pasta, but makes such a difference to the final texture. And then I'm going to show you how to laminate. So there's no real science. I think as long as you're getting, like people say you fold it like an envelope, but as long as you're getting folds into it, it's strengthening the dough. So this is how you fold it. You fold it over like a parcel. You don't need to be too precise. Then we're just going to roll it out until it's thin enough to fit through the first setting again. Cool. And so once it's rolled, you can tidy it up a little bit, cut off the rough edges. This just helps keep it nice and even. And we're going to repeat this a few more times until it's nice and laminated. And this is on setting 6. I've laminated it 3 times. So we're going to pass it through one more time, and then we're ready to dust the sheets and set them aside until we're ready to build the lasagna. So as you can see, I've got my long sheet of pasta. I'm just going to cut it into rectangles, dust it with some semolina flour, and then set it aside until we're ready to build. And then store them on a dusted tray with semolina, cover them with cling film, and then you can use them within a few hours. You can keep them in the fridge. This is the perfect way to prep in advance. For our third and final component of the lasagna, we need to make a delicious bechamel sauce. I'm not going to slay you. If you want to use ricotta, use ricotta. It still tastes delicious, but there's something about a creamy bechamel sauce that just hits different every single time. So first up, get yourself a pan, and then we're going to go in with the unsalted butter, and we're going to melt this over a medium heat. Now, if you want to level this up a little bit, you can toast this until it's brown butter. This adds a nice nuttiness to the bechamel. One of the things with lasagna is it can be really runny sometimes. So I'm going to be making this bechamel a little bit thicker than you would usually. Say you're using it as a white sauce for macaroni cheese, you're using it as a white sauce for something else. This is going to be a little bit thicker. Not quite as thick as one for a moussaka, but just thick enough so that it doesn't go really watery and fall apart when we plate it up later. And then I'm going in with some plain flour. And here, this is called the roux. This is what thickens the sauce. Give it a good mix so there's no lumps. And then when it's in a paste like this, we're just gonna cook it for a couple minutes before we start to add in the milk. And I'm now gonna start to add in my whole milk. You can use semi-skimmed, you can use alternative milks at this point. And a little bit at a time, we're just gonna mix in the milk. And it will seize up quite quickly. Look, you'll see it gets really thick, but keep working through that, keep mixing, keep doing it a little bit at a time until you get a really nice, smooth and glossy sauce. After about 10 minutes, I've now incorporated all my milk, and you should have a sauce like this. We're gonna season it with some salt, and then my secret ingredient, a little bit of nutmeg. And to finish it off, a grating of Parmesan. Then we're just gonna take this off, let it cool, and then we're gonna build the lasagna. So we've got everything ready. We've got our ragu, we've got our bechamel, and we've got our fresh pasta. I'm now gonna layer this up one by one, and we're gonna build this lasagna together. So go in with some of the ragu, just a little layer. Now, I like to mix this in with a little bit of bechamel at the bottom. So I'm gonna unfold my pasta, shake off any excess semolina. If you're using dried pasta for your lasagna, you can blanch them in hot water for a little bit to soften them. With fresh pasta like this, you don't need to do that because it will cook perfectly in all the juices. And then I'm just gonna layer this up. So it's very much a jigsaw, just fit in the pieces where you can. And another piece. And then we go on with the next layer. Some more mince, go in with some of the bechamel. Smooth this down, a little grating of Parmesan. And then repeat the layers until you've used up all of your ingredients. And there we have it, our lasagna, almost ready to go in the oven. So I've done the different layers. We've had 3 layers in this. We had the base layer, which I'm not really counting as one. Then we had another 1, 2, and then the top layer here with some mince and bechamel on top. The mandatory grating of Parmesan to finish. I'm now going to put this in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius, or this in degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to cook it until it's golden brown on top and beautifully hot on the inside. Here we have the lasagna. But this looks beautiful. If you serve it straight away, 1, it will be burning hot, so it will burn your mouth and it won't taste as good. 2, if it's really hot, it will still be very liquid. So you need to let it cool slightly so it's nice and warm. And then we're gonna serve it, grate over some more Parmesan and enjoy. And here we have it, ready to tuck in. That smells so good. This looks divine, and I'm very excited to tuck in. And that is the perfect slice of lasagna. Let's grate some Parmesan and tuck in. I think think it's only right to tuck in and try the lasagna. That is beautiful. It's really rich, it's buttery from that bechamel sauce, nice parmesan on top. You've got the crispy, cheesy edges around the side. The pasta is beautifully soft. Couldn't have gone much better than this. If you guys want to make something soon, I would highly recommend making this. It is an absolute game changer. It is my favorite way to make lasagna. So if you guys make this, send me a photo and I'll be sure to check it out. And until next time, let's do some cooking.